Humza Yousaf described himself as the
luckiest man in the world
when he was elected as the 14th leader of the SNP and, in consequence, the 6th First Minister of Scotland. Less than 400 days later, Mr Yousaf has accepted the brutal truth that he inherited a crown too heavy for his head and one irreversibly tainted by the legacy of what went before. Whatever you might think of his predecessors, Nicola Sturgeon and Salmond, they will be remembered long after their lifetimes. But Mr Yousaf, like his Westminster equivalent Liz Truss, is likely to become nothing more than a trivia question in years to come. Soon after he was elected, in March last year, the police began an investigation into the stewardship of the SNP's finances under Miss Sturgeon and her husband Peter Murrell, the SNP's former chief executive. Mr Murrell has since been charged in connection with the alleged embezzlement of funds from the party. Mr Yousaf also took over a party that was yoked to the Greens through a confidence and supply deal agreed by Miss Sturgeon that committed the party to radical reforms of trans rights and a huge reduction in carbon emissions by 2030. Some of his own MSPs warned him that the Greens were extremists who would drag the SNP down with them, but he ignored them. Instead, in one of the greatest miscalculations in recent political history, Mr Yousaf lashed himself to the Greens like a helmsman in a storm, saying the deal was worth its weight in gold. He finally realised that the deal was unworkable and politically poisonous when he terminated it last week, but by then it was too late.
I have therefore informed the SNP's National Secretary of my intention to stand down as party leader and ask that she commences a leadership contest for my replacement as soon as possible.
He had already brought in the Hate Crime Act that he himself had championed as Justice Minister and which left the police committed to investigating whether J.K. Rowling and others were criminals for expressing opinions on the immutability of biological sex. Instead of fulfilling his promises to reform the NHS, ease the cost of living crisis and improve rural housing, Mr Yousaf became mired in the culture wars and turned Scotland into an Orwellian land of thought crimes. By empowering trans ideologists to report anyone who disagreed with them to the police, with a promise that every complaint would be investigated, Mr Yousaf ensured his complete alienation from voters who wanted their police to solve burglaries and their politicians to focus on Scotland's appalling record on health, education and drug addiction, rather than on arguments about whether men could be women. The public never wanted Mr Yousaf as First Minister. Opinion polls before his election consistently showed that Kate Forbes, his socially conservative rival for the leadership, was far more popular with both SNP supporters and voters as a whole. But he won the backing of SNP members by portraying himself as the Sturgeon continuity candidate, unaware that her legacy was about to turn to ashes thanks to the criminal investigation into SNP finances, which so memorably included questions about a motorhome and which continue to this day. Nor did he try to distance himself from the Sturgeon agenda, despite advice to the contrary, which his critics interpreted as evidence that he had no agenda of his own. Mr Yousaf can at least console himself with the fact that he is not the shortest serving First Minister in the 25-year history of the job. That honour goes to Henry McLeish, the Labour MSP who managed just 1 year and 12 days from 2000 to 2001. Mr McLeish resigned after it emerged he had sublet part of his tax-subsidised office without declaring it, and has largely been forgotten. It's a fate that Mr Yousaf must now realise awaits him too.